This story is titled, My Aunt Kicked Me Out During Grandpa's Will Reading. Now, let's start the video. The lawyer frowned. His name is in the will. Then the room went silent. All right, read it. This is gonna be a long one, but trust me, it's worth it. I'm talking about the kind of family revenge story that makes you want to make a toast for finally getting things right. I need you to read the whole thing, fellas. Seriously. It cuts deeper than you're thinking. Name's Damien. 29 male. And I fix cars for a living. Not exactly prestigious work by today's standards. But here's the thing. I make $65,000 a year. I'm the best mechanic Bruno's auto shop ever had. And I can diagnose engine problems just by listening to them idle. My old man Vincent and my mom Anita are the real deal. Dad's been swinging hammers for construction crews since he turned 18. Mom cleans houses for rich people in Lincoln Park, who wipe their butts with $100 bills but have nervous breakdowns if she's 5 minutes late because of traffic. These are people who taught me your word means something. An honest day's work deserves honest pay, and you judge folks by how they treat the janitor, not how much they spend on lunch. We lived in this crappy 2-bedroom in Bridgeport until I was 16. Paper-thin walls where you could hear the neighbors screaming about money every night, a radiator that sounded like someone beating a drum with a wrench, and parking that was basically Thunderdome with snowplows. Dad would roll in covered in sawdust and drywall chunks, joints screaming from 10 hours on scaffolding, and still sit down to help me with algebra homework. Mom would pull back-to-back shifts scrubbing other people's toilets and somehow make our dumpy apartment feel like home. And you know what? I never once heard them complain. Never acted ashamed of getting dirty for money. Never made me feel like we were broke, even when we were eating soup for dinner 3 nights straight because grocery money was tight. They had pride in what they did. They taught me that too. Then there's the other branch of the family tree. My grandpa Chester Kowalski was legit old-school tough. Built an empire starting in 1978 with a beat-up Chevy pickup, a toolbox full of second-hand wrenches, and the kind of work ethic that modern people think is a myth. Crawled through sewage, fixed broken pipes when it was 20 below, and turned Kowalski Plumbing and Heating into the biggest commercial operation in Chicago. Dude could fix anything, wasn't scared to get nasty, and treated customers like humans. By the time I was old enough to understand what success looked like, Grandpa Chester was clearing 7 figures and had more commercial contracts than most companies dream about. But his other kids, my Uncle Russell and Aunt Camille, decided somewhere along the way that actual work was beneath them. Uncle Russell, 47, drives a Lexus he can barely make payments on and works some middle management at Strategic Solutions Incorporated, lives in this fake McMansion in Naperville with granite everything, and still acts like he's running Apple. He rocks suits that cost more than most people's car payments and throws around phrases like maximizing human capital. Aunt Camille, 44, married some trust fund guy whose family money disappeared when the housing market tanked in 2008, still shops at Nordstrom and drives a Cadillac Escalade that's 3 payments behind, but talks about family standards, like she descended from British royalty instead of a guy who installed toilets. And their golden boy Carter? Holy cow, where do I even start? Carter Richmond, also 29, went to Northwestern on mommy and daddy's borrowed cash and got a business degree in strategic marketing and digital innovation. Sounds impressive until you realize it means he spent 4 years learning to make PowerPoint presentations. Kid has never touched a tool more complicated than a screwdriver and thinks manual labor is what peasants do while he disrupts markets and leverages synergies. Got handed some nonsense job at a tech startup that burned through investor money but strutted around like he was the next Steve Jobs. So every family gathering was the same humiliating circus. Camille would corner my mom and drop comments like, "Anita, you look so tired. Ever think about finding something less demanding?" Russell would slap my dad's back and lecture him about expanding your skill set and thinking bigger picture. And the worst part? How they treated me growing up. Every win got minimized. Every setback got magnified. Made varsity wrestling as a sophomore. Camille made sure everyone knew Carter was debate team captain and student council treasurer. Got my ASE certification at 19. Russell wondered why I was limiting myself to blue-collar work when I could aim for management. Carter never missed a chance to humble brag about internships at marketing firms. Kid couldn't jumpstart a car if his life depended on it, but acted like he was destined for magazine covers. Family barbecues felt like psychological warfare. We'd show up in our best Walmart special while they flaunted designer everything and bragged about trips to places we'd never afford. They never said it straight up though. That would require actual backbone. But every time, they would make sure to make us feel like garbage with those nasty, passive-aggressive comments. You know the type. Every Sunday we'd drive to Grandpa's place, while Uncle Russell and Aunt Camille would roll up in their lease specials, complaining about traffic like they were doing everyone a favor by showing up. Grandpa would grab my shoulder. "Come on, kid. Let's see if we can get that Chevy running right." His garage was my church. 3 professional bays with lifts, tools organized like a military armory, parts bins sorted by decade and application, smelled like motor oil, WD-40, and honest work. This was where a man who understood machinery went to solve problems. We'd spend hours rebuilding carburetors, welding exhaust work, a '58 Impala that was his first big purchase after the business took off, a '70 Challenger he'd rescued from rotting in some downstate barn, cars that needed patience, skill, and respect for the engineering that went into them. "Your dad's the only one of my kids who never came crawling back when things got tight," he'd tell me while we cleaned spark plugs. Russell's borrowed 22 grand, still waiting for that check. Camille wanted me to co-sign on that house she couldn't actually afford. Your old man never asked for a dime. Then why do they think they deserve handouts? Because they never learned the difference between earning and expecting. I messed up raising them. He was right. I remember when I was 14, Dad took a nasty spill off scaffolding, messed up 2 discs, tore his rotator cuff, and destroyed his knee bad enough to need surgery. Workers' comp was basically legalized robbery. They fought every claim, questioned every doctor, and dragged out payments until we were 4 months behind on everything. I remember sitting at our kitchen table watching my parents stress about bills they couldn't pay, wondering if we were going to end up homeless because Dad had the nerve to get hurt at work. Know who stepped up without being asked? Grandpa Chester. Showed up with groceries, a rent check, and made it clear this wasn't charity. This was family handling family business. Bought me new work boots when mine fell apart. Paid for wrestling gear so I could stay on the team. Even covered my senior trip so I wouldn't be the only kid who couldn't afford it. Never held it over our heads during arguments. Know who didn't even send a get-well card? The Lexus-driving uncle and Escalade aunt who were too busy to help their own brother. Russell was dealing with his own cash flow challenges. Camille was redecorating her kitchen and couldn't spare the expense. But they both found time and nerve to lecture my parents about financial planning. That winter, while Dad was laid up and we were eating cereal for dinner, I'd listen to Camille brag about her 12 grand furniture set at Christmas. Russell would go on about his family ski trip to Colorado, blowing more on one vacation than we spent on food in 6 months. That's when I actually realized how messed up and dysfunctional the family was. Bruh, let me tell you about this too. Remember how my aunt always compared me to her son? As I got older, the comparisons between us got even worse. Aunt Camille turned every conversation into some twisted performance where I was always failing to meet her precious son's standards. Thanksgiving 2019 was peak insanity. Carter had just gotten some promotion at his startup. Senior Business Development Strategist. Kid waltzed into Grandpa's house wearing a charcoal suit, talking loudly on his iPhone about optimizing market penetration. Camille was practically floating with pride. Carter just secured a partnership with a Fortune 500 company. His firm's valuation has increased 400% this quarter. Russell, didn't you mention they're preparing for an IPO? Absolutely. Russell jumped in. Because enabling Camille's delusions was apparently his side hustle. Carter's positioned himself perfectly for the next wave of digital market expansion. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there in my cleanest Levi's and a flannel from Walmart, watching this performance. When Camille gave me that look. "And Damien, what's new with you? Still working at that garage?" I stayed calm. "Yeah, still fixing things when they break," I said. "Someone's gotta know how things actually work." "Of course." "How?" "Practical." The way she said practical, you'd think I had cancer. "Carter, why don't you tell Damien about your promotion? Maybe he could learn something about expanding his horizons." Later, while the adults argued about politics in the living room, Carter cornered me in the kitchen. "Look, Damien, I get that you're doing your thing. But have you considered real opportunities? I could probably get you an interview at my company. Entry level, obviously. But you'd learn about actual business. What makes you think I want to work for your company? Well, I mean, look where you are. Almost 30. Still renting. Working for someone else. Don't you want more? I set down my drink and really studied this kid. Same age as me, but somehow had never learned that talking down to people was a terrible life strategy. Carter, you make PowerPoints for a living. I rebuild engines. When your car breaks down, you call AAA and pray someone like me shows up to fix it. But sure, let's discuss who's got the real skills. There's more to success than grease under your fingernails. And there's more to intelligence than using $10 words to describe 5-cent ideas. He walked away looking hurt, and I went back to my Coke. Through the kitchen window, I could see my parents helping Grandpa clear dishes, while Russell and Camille sat in the living room, discussing whether the house would need updating before it could sell for maximum profit. They were already dividing up Grandpa's life, and the man was still eating his darn dinner. Until it happened. 3 years ago, Grandpa Chester started having what doctors politely called memory issues. Forgetting where he put his glasses, asking the same question twice, getting confused about what day it was. Uncle Russell and Aunt Camille immediately treated these tiny slip-ups like he'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Suddenly, they were super concerned about his cognitive decline and capacity to make decisions. Dad really needs to start planning for his future, Russell announced at Easter dinner, talking about Grandpa like he wasn't sitting right there. Assisted living facilities are like luxury hotels now. Translation, let's warehouse the old man. Camille jumped on board with her usual sledgehammer subtlety. Dad, you're all alone in that big house. Wouldn't it be nice having people your own age around? I wasn't having any of that nonsense. Started visiting twice a week after work, Tuesdays and Fridays religiously, plus most weekends. Brought dinner from Kowalski's Polish kitchen, his favorite spot that made pierogi like his mom used to. Helped organize the 17 different medications that kept multiplying. Fixed whatever was broken, from leaky faucets to windows that wouldn't close. Now some of you might get me wrong. I swear I wasn't doing any of that for money. I genuinely loved the old man. He taught me everything since I was a kid. And now it was my turn to be his backbone. And more than the practical stuff, we'd just hang out. Sit in his living room watching Cubs games and arguing about whether today's players were softer than the old school guys. He'd tell stories I'd never heard about building his business from scratch. About my grandmother who died when I was too young to remember. About my dad as a kid and how proud he was that his youngest son chose principles over profit. These conversations usually happened while I was fixing something around his house. Replacing garbage disposals, cleaning gutters, touching up paint where walls got dinged up. Work that needed doing but nobody else wanted to do. Family visits became less frequent as Grandpa needed actual help instead of performative concern. Russell would show up maybe once a month, spend 10 minutes asking about health stuff, then 40 minutes discussing estate planning and asset optimization. Always had some fresh financial emergency requiring immediate attention. The BMW needed transmission work that insurance wouldn't cover. Carter's student loans were bigger than expected and messing with Russell's credit as co-signer. The consulting firm was going through restructuring and Russell needed a safety net while he explored other opportunities. Meaning, give me money so I can keep pretending I'm successful. Camille's visits followed the same script. Quick concern about Grandpa's health, then lengthy discussions about how expensive home maintenance was getting and how much simpler life would be in managed care. Carter visited exactly 6 times during those 3 years. Each visit lasted under 40 minutes and usually involved urgent phone calls. One time I showed up to find Carter had set up a full mobile office in Grandpa's dining room. Laptop, wireless printer, legal pads covered with charts. Been there 2 hours and said maybe 10 words to the man who owned the house. Working on something important? Client presentation Monday. Major deal hanging in the balance. Couldn't do this at your place? Mom's got book club. Too noisy. So Grandpa's house was for quiet office space. After Carter left, Grandpa and I sat on his back porch drinking, watching his neighbor's dog destroy their flower bed. That boy spent 3 hours here and never looked up from his computer. Maybe he's changing the world. Maybe. Or maybe he's just a jerk who thinks being busy is the same as being important. By 2023, Grandpa's health was sliding downhill fast. Not his mind. That stayed sharp as a knife until the end. But his body was giving out. Moving slower. Getting tired easier. Needing help with stuff he'd always handled himself. The family response was predictable. More pressure to simplify his living situation. More suggestions about professional care. More discussions about what's best for Dad that somehow never included asking Dad what he actually wanted. I started coming by every Tuesday and Friday after work, plus most Saturdays. We'd go through his mail together since scammers target old people like sharks smell blood. Helped with grocery runs, yard work, any heavy lifting that needed doing. During these visits, I started noticing stuff that ticked me off. Expensive items would disappear from Grandpa's house, then mysteriously show up in social media photos from Russell's or Camille's places. This antique clock that had always been in his hallway vanished for 2 weeks, then appeared in the background of Camille's Instagram post about entertaining at home. When I mentioned it, Grandpa just smiled. "Oh, I know exactly where everything goes. Been keeping track longer than you might think. Aren't you mad? Kid, I've been watching this family's true colors for years. Takes more than missing silverware to surprise me now." One Friday evening, I walked in to find him sitting at his kitchen table with folders spread out like he was running a board meeting. Each folder had a family member's name on it. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" "Project. Been documenting everyone's behavior for 3 years. Visits. Phone calls. Money requests. Actual help provided versus inheritance expectations expressed." He opened Russell's folder first. "Russell's into me for $47,000 over 3 years. Car repairs. Property taxes. Carter's expenses. Always promises payback once his next big deal comes through. Funny that deal never happens." Camille's folder was thicker. Notes about her constant suggestions to downsize, sell, or relocate. Photos of missing items. Copies of credit card statements showing charges to his accounts for everything. Carter's folder was the thinnest. "Kid's been here 7 times in 2 years. Average visit, 23 minutes. Spent most of that time on his phone or laptop." "Wait, why are you documenting all this?" "Because I want to be fair." He pulled out one more folder, labeled with my name. "You've been here 247 times since your dad got hurt 3 years ago. Never asked me for anything. Just showed up and did whatever needed doing. That's just being family. No, kiddo. That's being a man. Big difference." He closed all the folders and looked at me. "I'm gonna ask you to do something. When the time comes, and you'll know when that is, I need you to trust me completely. Even if what happens doesn't make sense at first. Can you do that?" "Of course." "Good." Quick pause. "Fellas, YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support." Alright, back to the drama. 2 months later, Grandpa Chester got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4, aggressive. Basically a death sentence with a timeline. Grandpa Chester's last 6 months. The closer he got to checking out, the more the family revealed their true selves. Russell became obsessed with preserving Dad's legacy, which meant making sure business assets were properly managed during this transition period. Started showing up with legal documents, powers of attorney that would let Russell make financial decisions in case Dad becomes unable to handle his affairs. "Just a precaution," Russell would explain. "We want everything handled professionally if your condition gets worse." Grandpa would examine these documents with the same expression he got when telemarketers called. "I'll think about it," he'd say. Then file the papers somewhere they'd disappear forever. Camille took a different angle. Started bringing real estate agents to informally assess the house value, financial advisors to discuss portfolio optimization, and elder care specialists to evaluate Grandpa's changing needs. "Dad, we just want you to have options," she'd say, while some suit walked through his living room. "I've got options, daughter. Stay in my house till I die, or stay in my house till I die." But they kept pushing. Every visit became a sales pitch for some new scheme that would simplify his life and reduce his burden. Meanwhile, I'm showing up after 10-hour days, fixing other people's cars, bringing dinner, and helping Grandpa navigate medical bureaucracy. We'd sit in his garage, him in his old chair while I worked on whatever car was currently taking up his lift, and he'd share observations about the family that were getting sharper. Russell borrowed money again last month, he mentioned, while I changed oil in his Tacoma. Some cryptocurrency mining thing that's guaranteed to triple his investment. Kid doesn't understand that when something sounds too good to be true, someone's about to get screwed. During one visit, Camille showed up with Carter. They spent an hour walking through the house, Camille taking photos and Carter measuring rooms for space planning purposes. During his final months, Grandpa started asking me to help with paperwork organization. We'd spend hours going through files, sorting documents. He was also creating new documentation. Detailed logs of every family interaction. Photos of his possessions with dates and descriptions. Video recordings of conversations with Russell and Camille about selling the house and optimizing his estate for tax efficiency. 3 weeks before he died, Grandpa asked me to help him with something in his basement. Behind the water heater was a safe built into the concrete foundation. He opened it and pulled out more folders than I'd seen in most offices. Legal documents, financial records. What looked like a complete inventory of everything he owned. Been keeping detailed records, he said matter-of-factly. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it. This is for you, kid. Open it after I'm gone. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small key. Damien, if you're reading this, know that I've been planning something that's gonna upset a lot of assholes. The key opens safety deposit box 847 at First National downtown. Inside, you'll find copies of everything that matters. I've been testing this family for years, kid. You passed every test without knowing you were taking them. Trust Morrison. And remember what I taught you about tools. They're only as good as the hands holding them. And by the way, it's a little too dark here. Grandpa Chester, even when gone, he managed to make me smile. Grandpa Chester died on a Tuesday morning in April. I'd taken the day off because he'd been having a rough week and my gut told me not to leave him alone. We spent the morning sorting his medications, then watched The Price is Right while arguing about whether contestants were getting dumber. He dozed off in his recliner around noon. When I checked an hour later, he was gone. Peaceful as you could ask for. Just decided he was tired and clocked out. The family showed up within an hour like a SWAT team. Russell and Camille bustling around, making calls, handling arrangements. Like Grandpa's death was a business deal requiring immediate management. We'll take care of everything, Camille announced with all the warmth of a tax auditor. You don't need to stress about the details. They took over his house like it was D-Day. Russell immediately started securing important documents and making sure nothing gets lost. Camille called funeral homes and florists, planning a service that would properly honor Dad's standing in the community. Carter spent most of the time on his phone, apparently managing some business crisis that couldn't wait. Sorry guys, timing's terrible but we're closing a major deal. Grandpa would get it. He was a businessman. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. Russell delivered a eulogy about Chester Kowalski's entrepreneurial legacy. Instead of talking about the actual human being we were burying, Camille organized everything like a wedding, making sure everyone knew how much effort she was putting into honoring Dad's memory. After the service, while everyone networked over catered sandwiches, I heard Russell talking to Camille about moving quickly on estate matters and securing business assets before market conditions shifted. 2 weeks went by. I went back to work. Tried processing grief. Nobody called. Thursday night, I'm eating when my phone buzzes. Text from Carter. Family meeting tomorrow at Morrison's office. 2 p.m. Mom says keep this between immediate family only. 30 seconds later. Sorry, wrong group chat. Just ignore that. Confirmation that my own family was planning to exclude me from Grandpa's estate meeting. An accidental text revealing exactly how much they respected the man who'd been more of a father figure than anyone else. These people had spent my entire life treating my parents like embarrassing relatives. Acting like honest work was beneath their borrowed sophistication. Pretending their leveraged lifestyle made them better than us. I called Bruno and told him I needed Friday off. Personal emergency. He just said, handle your business, kid, because he's good people. That night, I opened Grandpa's envelope. Tomorrow felt like the kind of day I'd need preparation for. Friday morning, I put on my least crappy clothes and drove downtown. If Grandpa Chester wanted me there, I was gonna be there. The waiting room at Morrison's looked like central casting for privileged jerks of Chicago. Russell in his Navy power suit checking his Rolex every 30 seconds. Camille clutching her knockoff Hermes bag. Carter typing furiously about urgent synergy emergencies. When I walked through those glass doors, you could have heard a pin drop. "What the heck are you doing here?" Russell jumped up. "Same thing you are. Saying goodbye to Grandpa Chester." "Damien, honey." Camille spoke with her usual tone. "This is really just for people involved in Chester's business affairs. Technical matters that wouldn't interest someone in your situation." Before I could tell her where to shove her technical matters, Morrison emerged. Distinguished silver-haired guy with decades of experience settling family wars. "Damien Kowalski. Chester spoke of you constantly." Russell's face went through about 6 different colors. "There's been a misunderstanding. Damien wasn't supposed to be included in this." "Chester's grandson? The one visiting 3 times weekly?" Chester was extremely thorough in his communications. Extremely thorough. I took a seat near the door while everyone else huddled at the far end like poverty was contagious. Morrison opened folders thick as dictionaries. "Before we begin, Chester was very specific about his intentions. He was also aware that items had been removed from his residence without authorization." Dead silence. "Chester installed comprehensive security throughout his property 8 months ago. He documented every family interaction, every loan, every questionable transaction." Morrison flipped through his notes, including the $31,000 you've borrowed, Mr. Kowalski, for various investment opportunities that never resulted in repayment. Russell went white. Those were family loans. Chester understood exactly what the money was for. He also understood that promises to repay were meaningless, without intention to follow through. Morrison turned to Camille. "Mrs. Richmond, Chester documented $12,000 in unauthorized charges to his accounts. Salons, shopping, vacations. When questioned, you claimed these were household management expenses." Camille's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "I was helping manage his affairs. Someone needed to charge $200 manicures to his American Express? Chester found those household necessities quite fascinating." Carter looked up from his iPad. "What about me?" Morrison smiled like a shark. "You haven't borrowed money, Mr. Richmond. You've simply ignored your grandfather while photographing his house for social media posts about family legacy." Chester kept visitor logs. 9 visits in 3 years, averaging 31 minutes, mostly spent on business calls. Morrison pulled out the actual will. By contrast, Damien visited 247 times, provided transportation, household assistance, companionship, never requested money. With that context, Chester Stanley Kowalski's final wishes. "To my son Russell, who called 40 times requesting money, but visited 11 times in 3 years, who borrowed $31,000 for investments any rational person would recognize as scams, I leave $1 and the suggestion he learned the difference between earning and expecting." Russell's face went gray. "To my daughter Camille, who charged $12,000 in personal expenses while claiming care management, who brought real estate agents without permission, I leave $1 and the recommendation she discovered the dignity of earning her own way." Camille started hyperventilating like someone was strangling her. "To my grandson Carter, who spent more time in my house conducting business than speaking with me, I leave $1 and the advice that networking is meaningless without character." Carter dropped his iPad. Thing hit the conference table like a gunshot. Morrison cleared his throat. "To my grandson Damien, who showed up 247 times without being asked, who never requested money or favors, who demonstrated the values I spent my life trying to instill, I leave the entirety of my estate." The room went dead silent. "This includes my residence, the commercial property housing Kowalski Plumbing and Heating, all business assets and accounts, personal financial accounts, my classic automobile collection, and every tool in my garage. Total estimated value approximately $3.7 million. The room exploded like someone had detonated a bomb in a daycare center. Russell screamed about undue influence. Camille collapsed into Oscar-worthy sobs. Carter frantically started calling lawyers on his cracked screen. Morrison waited for the hysteria to die down. There's also the matter of $73,000 worth of items removed without authorization. Chester maintained complete inventory with photographic evidence. All items must be returned within 30 days or we'll file criminal charges and refer the matter to the state's attorney. He looked straight at me. Chester wanted me to deliver a personal message. The boy knows the difference between a wrench and a weapon. I trust him to use both appropriately when the time comes. Russell finally found his voice. This is your doing. You manipulated a sick old man. You piece of garbage. I didn't reply. Just smiled. I was thinking about all those Tuesday and Friday evenings. Fixing his garbage disposal. Driving him to chemo. Just being there because that's what you do for the family. Nah, Uncle Russell. Grandpa Chester knew exactly what he was doing. He always did. For the first time in my life, I was the one walking out while everyone else sat there trying to figure out what the heck had just happened. The next 3 months were pure chaos. And I loved every second. Russell hired this bottom-feeder attorney named Sullivan who took one look at Grandpa's documentation and basically told him to start practicing "Would you like fries with that?" The old man had built a legal fortress that would have impressed the FBI. Security footage was devastating. Hours of video showing Russell loading stolen tools into his Lexus. Camille wrapping jewelry while Grandpa napped in his chair. Carter pocketing collectible coins during his brief visits. Camille tried playing victim on Facebook. Posting about family betrayal and honoring the deceased. Backfired when people who actually knew Grandpa started commenting about how he'd been abandoned by his own kids. Carter's startup folded 3 weeks after the will reading. Turns out investors were expecting family money that wasn't coming anymore. Without Grandpa's cash injection, their revolutionary platform revealed itself as basically connecting websites to other websites for fees nobody wanted to pay. Morrison filed preliminary motions including Grandpa's video testimonials recorded with multiple attorney witnesses. 3 hours of a completely competent old man explaining why he was cutting his family out of his legacy. Russell thinks debt equals investment. Camille thinks spending other people's money makes her sophisticated. Carter thinks talking about success is the same as achieving it. Damien shows up and doesn't ask for anything. The choice seems obvious to me. They returned the stolen items within a month via moving companies. No apologies, just legal minimums to avoid criminal prosecution. But here's where stuff gets really good. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was freedom to fix everything that had been broken. First priority, my parents. Paid off 30 years of accumulated debt, credit cards maxed when Dad got hurt, medical bills that never stopped coming, truck loans and mortgage payments, then bought them a solid ranch house in a quiet neighborhood where they could actually